Hi, everybody, and welcome to TNM Coaching Interconnected Podcast at ZoranTodorovic.com. I'm so grateful and happy to have you with us once again on this podcast that elevates your mind, elevates your heart and your soul to the next level and beyond. When you get inspired to think new thoughts, to consider certain things that you don't have time to consider in your daily work life, and to learn something new. And today we're going to go back into this wonderful topic of emotional intelligence at work. What does it mean? How do we use it? What do we need to be mindful of? How do we need to show up as emotionally intelligent leaders, employees, co-workers in everyday workplace? And how that wonderful topic of becoming emotional intelligence can really support you become the best possible version of yourself in your work life and at home as well. And today with us, Pia Ault. She is a wonderfully seasoned professional. She has more than 20 years in senior levels of corporate experiences in multidimensional companies, in technology business, manufacturing, specializing in business development. He is highly skilled in the team coaching, leadership development coaching. She loves multicultural, diverse, and sensitive environments when it comes to different people, different cultures, and she lived and worked across the world as well. She's also very excited about emotional intelligence, human behaviors, attitudes, social relationships. And her strengths are in the business development, leadership development, change management, HR transformation. She loves coaching individuals. She loves developing teams to be able to perform at their best efficiency in their everyday work life. So she's a wonderful colleague and co-facilitator. And I'm so grateful and happy to have her with me today. So welcome, Pia.
Thank you, Zoran. I'm really excited to be here.
And in preparation, we were talking how important this topic is, emotional intelligence. It never gets old. You know, I know that emotional intelligence for some people is the term that we already know, that some people are practicing, but it's not there yet. In a way, not everybody is aware of it, not everybody is using it, not everybody is building the skill of being emotional intelligence, and everybody understands the importance of being emotionally intelligent at work. So let's start with that. From your perspective, when you are working with the teams, from your experiences, why do you believe and feel being emotionally intelligent at work is crucial nowadays?
Well, let me, before I answer that, go back to where you said we're not there yet. And we are not there yet because in my opinion, and in all of the studying and research I've done, and of course also having been in corporate for years and years, I feel that we're not there because there isn't a welcoming of emotions and empathy at work, right? We can bring ourselves to work. We can talk about ideas and be creative and make decisions. But when it comes to how we feel and expressing our emotions in terms of, I don't feel so good today, or, you know, we might just use phrases like, I'm okay, but it really covers a lot of things that are deeper. And workplaces and bosses and leaders don't really want to hear how the employees are doing, not truly, because they don't know how to react to it. It's not necessarily that they aren't empathic, but they just get uncomfortable around feelings and emotions, so they don't talk about them. And therefore, when they don't talk about them or welcome them, that then puts a glass ceiling on emotional intelligence and being able to be authentic around how people feel at work.
Yeah, completely agreed, because I can see that this discomfort of somebody being 100% authentic, 100% truthful, being able to share, or not just hiding behind, I'm great, I'm fantastic, you know, I'm good,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's not easy, basically. And why do the leaders find this not comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, so in the leadership development and facilitation and training that I get involved in, and also in my coaching, obviously we create the safe space. We welcome the ability to talk about how the leader feels and, you know, what is coming up for them. And they may not have words to say, well, I'm anxious, or they might feel uncertain about the future, but they won't name it as anxiety. Or fear of the future. They'll just say, well, we're going through a lot of changes. Well, changes bring anxiety and fear, and that's good. It should, because it needs to alert us to prepare for it. So I see a lot of leaders, or a lot of people in general, because of the way that we've been conditioned and taught, to avoid what we have learned as being negative emotions versus positive emotions. And positive emotions, the happiness, the joy, the excitement, optimistic, those are all welcome in the workplace. But shame and fear and anger and rage and sadness and jealousy, that's not. So, if you start to already categorize what emotions are welcome and what emotions are not welcome, then you're already teaching your employees to not speak up, and the leaders won't speak up about what's going on.
So we all have it inside of ourselves that somehow we feel this is politically incorrect or not acceptable, for us to be fully authentic with our emotions. We hide behind our emotions, we put them on the carpet, and then it builds up, right? So I can see it myself. There's some level of toxicity when it comes to the emotions within the workplace because of lack of transparency and expression. So is this how you see it as well, that this lack of authenticity builds up that toxicity? And how does it show up, actually? How does this toxicity play within the workplace?
Well, if we talk about, there is actually a term for this. We call it toxic positivity bias. So when we want, as leaders, and we want to create good workplaces, we want people to feel emotionally safe and to be happy to come to work and have fun. And then we say, okay, if you're not really happy, go talk to somebody else about that, right? Don't really bring that in. Or we create mindfulness courses, or we create yoga at work, things that are going to bring happiness to people and make them feel good. But what it does, it really doesn't work to bring that kind of positivity to work if it's not genuine or authentic. So it creates this suffering and suppresses what people will allow themselves to talk about. They won't bring up the problems that exist at their level to higher management because they'll have a feeling of, well, why should I bring that up? Nobody's listening anyway. Or I don't want to bother them because they want us to be productive and they don't really want to hear the bad news. You see what I'm saying? It's never going to make it to the top. And even if they hear it at the top, they may go, yeah, but that's life, right? You were paid to be here. So you can't really go anywhere. So this toxic positivity bias really causes a suppression of the emotions that want to come out. People want to express how they're feeling, but they're not able to. And so if you have more leaders that are emotionally intelligent and have a true, authentic empathy for their employees, and that allow the teams to speak openly and safely and sharing this information, well, then you can create a better and more safe and more emotionally welcomed environment where people actually do want to share what's going on. Then you open up creativity, you open up idea sharing, nobody's afraid of being judged. It just has a knock-on effect of how you then behave in the workplace.
Exactly. And the big one, the emotions are important. I always say, the fact that we feel makes us human. If we take feelings out of us ourselves, we take humanity alongside with it, and then we become something else. We're not fully functional human being with all the capacities.
Yeah.
Because lovely things with emotion, passion, excitement, optimism, ability to drive, ability to sustain, ability to laugh and have humor, all of that lovely things, come with our ability to feel, to be emotional.
Yeah, absolutely true. Yes, you're absolutely right on. I mean, if you think about it, emotions are behind everything we do, every decision we make, every lovely act, violent act, every dream, desire, failure, triumph, any social relationship, and interaction, it has a level of emotions to it, right? So you can't avoid it.
So you mentioned once when the leader begin building up the skills of emotional intelligence, showing up to be more empathic or compassionate. So how somebody who listens to this podcast, and let's say that I'm a leader in a tech industry, and I coached a lot of leaders in the tech industry recently, when they have a very systematic linear brain, they're really, really brainy, they're thinking a lot, they are good communicators, And they do understand they're lacking in emotional intelligence. Some of the leaders that I've coached on tech industry specifically, they will say, but I was a great engineer. I'm a fantastic software developer. I understand code. I'm really good friends with machines. When it comes to people, I'm lacking this, ability to really tune in, to feel, to show up, and so on and so forth. For somebody like that, I'm just using tech industry as an example because I had experiences. For somebody like that, how do we start developing that muscle? What is the path? What is it that, the leaders can start looking into, learning, thinking about, trying out for the small things so that somehow they can show up, as you beautifully said, with more compassion, more empathy, more integrity, more authenticity?
Well, the good news is that even if you don't have a lot of emotional intelligence as you come out of university with a, engineering degree, it's something that can be learned well into your 50s. So, there is hope. And it really starts with the self. A lot of the models that are out there around emotional intelligence and EQ, EQI, the different assessments, you'll notice that they almost all start with the self. So becoming more self-aware of how you operate in relationship to others and yourself. How are you in terms of decision making? Are you impulsive? Are you emotionally expressive, or do you, suppress everything? How are you in terms of your self-regard, your self-confidence, your self-esteem? How did you grow up? How were you conditioned by your parents? Were you, for example, rewarded for a lot of doing, getting good grades, getting awards and first prizes in swimming and football? All of those things, how we were appraised as young, tells us if we were appraised more for doing than being, then you're going to always chase that glory or that next, the next goal. I'm going to do more to be more. And really, if you're more self-aware and you have the ability to be more present and do more for others, be more helpful, be more fun, be more supportive, that then creates that level of empathy, and that's where your emotional intelligence is going to start to increase, as well as understanding your own emotions and not, being afraid of them or thinking that they're a problem for you. So it really starts with the self.
So knowing
that's a long answer, but
I know, but it's a great answer. I love it, because, that's a good question. I know some of the people who listen to this will ask. So knowing self, getting to really understand who you are, exploring your own emotional landscape. You mentioned different things from your family to upbringing. You mentioned also default programming, how you got programmed when it comes to reward. Because for me, I was just thinking, as you say, how interesting is that? Because, I was at one point in time competitive in my life. I really wanted to win the prizes. So I need to do more to be able to be recognized. So there is a doer inside of me. And then the beer, somebody that's being sometimes sleeps. But then with that, I'm disconnecting myself from the emotion on a certain level. So it's super important, to explore, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not bad to be a doer. As long as you balance because look, you've been across many multi national, companies. It doesn't really matter what industry they're in, if it's technology or consulting or real estate or banking. They all tend to reward people who are doers, right? Sell more, get more clients, close more deals. And so people that are doers and that are competitive and, like you said, go for the goals, and they were rewarded for that growing up by their parents, by their teachers, by their coaches, in football and whatnot, they're going to seek out those types of career choices because that's where they're rewarded, right? Whereas people who are maybe more present, more empathic, more in the being mode, they might go into careers that help others, social workers, doctors, therapists, yeah. So, I mean, but there's no negative or positive about that. It's just, who you are, how you were sort of conditioned as you grew up and came into your teens, and you know, if you can balance that doing and being, I think that you're already well on your way to being emotionally intelligent and empathic.
I love that. I love that. But you introduce balance. I think that's a golden word as well, balance between being and doing. And I would love to ask you a few more questions around that, because sometimes, you know, I know that, again, managers and leaders that I'm coaching, or I'm in the workshop situation, when we talk about the topic of emotional intelligence, and then people don't really want to share the emotions, and they put it in under the umbrella of stress. And they would say, I would ask them, how are you? And they would tell me, I'm stressed out. And how are you? You know, big stress. How are you? It's so stressful at work. How are you? It's stress. No, it's big stress.
Poor stress. It gets used for so many things.
I don't know what to say. You know, then I get stressed with the stress. I'm like, how are you? I'm stressed as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that somehow we are bypassing, we don't have enough capacity, enough language, enough sensitivity,
Right.
you know, to really define it. So what is your take when somebody comes and begins using the S word so much? You know, how do you relate to that?
I love that.
S word.
The dreaded S word. Yeah. You said it. You just said it. We don't have the language. We don't have the nuanced vocabulary, the granular vocabulary that describe, or that enables us to describe how we are, how we feel, what emotion is coming up. And I'm not advocating that we all get, you know, the vocabulary book and start to practice all the words, but we can start by learning more words, right? We can start to, if we talk about stress, go into ourselves and say, well, if I really have to be honest with myself, what is it I'm stressed about? Well, I have too many projects at work. Okay, so what do you then need to do? Maybe you're getting resentful or angry because you keep getting more projects. So you get angry at your boss. So then we've identified anger, which really has to do with the ability to set boundaries and follow the rules and, you know, procedures. So now we're already a little bit smarter emotionally, because now we know that I'm stressed and I feel angry because I've got too much work. So now we can take an action of delegating or prioritizing or having the conversation with our leader. Look, we have this amount of work. I think we need more resources, or we have to say no to some of the projects right now. So that's just one example. Stress, stress can also be, could be toxic culture at work, or be conflicts. You know, somebody is feeling always judged or ashamed, or they are afraid to go into work because they're bullied, or there's a, you know, narcissistic tendencies, you know, from the team, whatever. And then the real emotion might be anxiety and fear. So now again, they can start to take action because they've taken it from the stress label to an actual word that describes how they're feeling. So, you know, having a bigger emotional vocabulary certainly will help. And also understanding what might you need to let go of, because we can't do it all. Stress isn't, you know, it's a physiological response. We have stress hormones that for a reason, because we were meant to run away from fear, from danger, you know, and so we need that stress to be able to function. But it has got a bad rep. It has got a very bad reputation, because it also can lead to diseases and, you know, heart attacks and whatnot. So if we change our mindset around what stress does to us, or how it can work for us to drive us forward instead of something that we have to fear, you know, then that might also help. To sort of not lump everything in under the stress word.
I love it. And I think the two examples that you use are so relevant and good when we kind of dig deeper into what's really behind this, what really causes that stress. And then on the root cause, as you said, the anger can lead to me being able to set fantastic boundaries and get back into that balance that we just talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if I am not pretty secure, or I have a low self-esteem and I have anxiety, or how can I then use that knowledge or knowing of that emotion to be able to drive my self-esteem to the next level? What do I need to put in place? How do I need to communicate to be able to be more functional human being? But the bottom line is, especially with the stress, I think it's super important nowadays because it has been so overused and people keep on doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Find the right words and language.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I mean, we have a lot of these non-specific emotions words. When we lack a word that we need to use to describe something, we just come up with the words that come the closest. And stress is probably the one that's used the most. Sometimes if we don't feel good, we just say, well, I'm kind of feeling bad. But what does bad mean, right? Mm-hmm. Or we go into the word whatever. Whatever, right? And so that's we don't have any other word tools, but it's a start, right? And then digging deeper, like you said, finding out what really am I feeling.
So when the leader, or somebody who is on that journey of becoming more and more emotional intelligence, begins to know himself or herself, and they get in relationship with themselves, and they keep on learning or going to the course or giving themselves permission to be in relationship with their emotions, finding the new language. So they're growing in their emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. How can they then show up within the work context as leaders who are, I want to use this word, courageous enough, because I think there is something around courageousness and giving yourself permission to show up your emotional intelligence, because on a certain level you need to be vulnerable, but we can open that field.
Yeah.
What happens then? How can they show up in this domain and courageously create a new environment or culture when this is something that is norm, standard, accepted?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned courage and vulnerability, and I don't think we can get around that, because that is really what is needed for the leader to step up and say, I'm the example. I want to take this work out. I want to show you all that I'm a human being as well. I'm not perfect. I can bare my chest, so to speak. I can share that I also have fears, and I'm also anxious about the future. We're going through change. It's going to require all of us to step up. So it almost has to start with the leader's courage and stepping out and saying, here's what I've done. The work I've done on myself, I'm now ready to share with you. And I'm not afraid of being judged or laughed at. And then go out into the team, because that's going to create the trust. And the trust is what you have to have in order to, build high-performing teams, get results. Everybody has to be an equal part of the system, and be allowed to be in that atmosphere and culture with no fears of sharing what they're all going through, and putting their hand up and saying, me too. I'm glad I'm not the only one. So I think as a leader, when you find the courage and when you welcome your vulnerability, to then step in and say, here's what we need to do as a team. And let me be the first to step out of the comfort zone.
Yeah. And I witnessed few times, not a lot, to be very honest with you, few times when leaders decided to do this and they were insecure to begin with. And I also kind of received the feedback from them. Now, when we open that field, what will that lead to? Because sometimes people are afraid if somebody says, me too.
Yeah, I know.
And this becomes some kind of group therapy that is going to keep on being rolled out forever. Right? So it's not, right? From your experience as well, it's not.
No, I think that, of all of the leaders that I worked with, and, this all the way up to board level, CEOs, when they get that aha moment of, it's actually, I'm not going to fall off a cliff if I go out and tell my team that I'm also afraid of the economic crisis, or I have no idea how we're going to handle this merger and acquisition, or whatever it might be that they're standing in front of. But the fact that they're there and they're bringing their team with them, and that they're all sharing the burden or the joys or the triumphs or the failures. There's that feeling of being part of something bigger and that you're all together in this, right?
And then it creates coherence, of course, and then everybody is, in alignment with themselves. And I think that we all own imperfections because, for example, I love that when this happens in teams through emotional intelligence, when we're honest and vulnerable enough to share our insecurities and we understand that we all have imperfections and we all work in progress in a certain level, and then everybody else can they can do the same. And with that in mind, this coherence of the team builds up in such a beautiful way because, all of these unspoken emotions kind of dissipate, and then they create this field that you said of high performance, isn't it?
Yeah. The coherence brings me to something else. I think that part of my leadership development and coaching involves horses. I'm, passionate about horses, and we can learn a lot from the horse herd. And one of the things that I was just thinking about when you said coherence is that one of my mentors have taught me when there's a crisis, people tend to scatter. And when there's a crisis in the wild with a horse herd, the horses convene, right? So they use that coherence and that safety as a group, as a herd, and they'll go together through that situation in whichever way it's required. Whereas we run around like chickens with our heads cut off, rather than come together, convene in a coherent team and say, okay, how do we get through this crisis? How do we get through this situation? So there's a lot to be said for, kind of having your wits about you and saying, let's not spend silly energy to handle this crisis because we're just going to waste the energy when we really need it. And horses have that ability to say, well, if we don't need to run, we're not going to run. We're going to convene and we're going to figure out, is there a reason to run, or can we just stay here and, get through this?
And mentioning the horses, what was the most important lesson that you learned from horses about emotional intelligence?
The ability to set boundaries has to be the biggest learning for me. And it's actually funny because I was in a round pen in a clinic over a weekend years ago when I was training to be an equine facilitated practitioner. And I came into this round pen and the facilitator asked me, there are two horses in here, large horses, right? Like 1,200 pounds. And she said, no, now remember, you have to be able to, respect their space and they have to respect yours. I'm like, yeah, no problem. Because I wasn't afraid of horses. But they both started to come towards me. And she says, now remember, I told you, respect their space and they have to respect your space. How are you about setting boundaries? I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. And so I started to kind of wiggle my finger and go like this to the horse, okay, back up. And it just kept coming. It kept coming. It kept coming right up here to, rubbing me. And I'm like, okay. So that we all started laughing because in reality, I had absolutely no boundaries. And they picked up on the fact that I was not afraid. I would welcome them in. But the analogy that she then tied to this was, if that was your boss, what would that be like? I'm like, oh my God, he's in my space. And he's just asking for more and more and asking me to go on more trips and asking me to do more work. And here I am trying to say no and go, no, you're too close. She says, yeah, how's that working out? So I think boundaries and, the ability to kind of gauge the situation was the biggest learning for me at the time. And I keep coming back to that. If you can set boundaries and hold the space with a 1,200-pound horse, you can easily set a boundary with, a normal boss man.
Exactly. And they can feel it, because what I love about that story is that even though you were saying, I know I have boundaries, I know how to do it, here I am, no, the actual feeling of it, in coherent field, they knew that, either you had weak boundaries or you don't have any boundaries, so they gave themselves permission to do it. because we feel it, right? And this is all part of emotional intelligence. We can feel what's really going on with somebody else before they tell us, because what they tell us might not be the reality, might not be the truth. Not because people intentionally lie, it's because people want to present themselves in the light they want to see themselves, but sometimes it's not reality of what is really going on in their life, isn't it?
Yeah, true. They might have blind spots. They may not be aware of how they really show up, and they might think that's one side of them. But like you said, intuitively, we tend to be able to see that there's something more.
Yeah. And I love that you use the boundaries as an example, because again, I think that we were never taught to do that as children. I think nobody sat down with any one of us, even nowadays with the enlightened parents, and told them, listen, boundaries, really important part of you living as a functional human being. And here is why, and here is how you set them up, and here is how you enforce them, and here is how you communicate, and here is how you're non-violent about them, and here is how you become extremely healthy if you know how to do this. We did it intuitively, instinctively, we learn along the way. But I think that's that part of intelligence of our emotions, boundaries, still super important. So if you're somebody who's listening to this and recognizing yourself in Pia's story, get into it, learn how to do it, right?
Well, I think that you can recognize when people that have poor boundaries, and then you say, well, how would it feel to work on setting healthier, stronger boundaries? Oh, no, I couldn't say no to this because I might offend them. I might make them angry. I'm afraid to hurt their feelings. I couldn't possibly say no to my boss because he counts on me. So there's that failure aspect of not being good enough or being right enough or doing the right thing. And so I think that there's a lot of fear that plays into setting these boundaries because we're afraid of either being rejected or not liked or offending somebody else. So there are all of these emotions come into that. But anger is the one that really helps us set the boundaries, because when our boundaries and values and principles are violated or dishonored or disrespected, that's what comes up. It's anger and resentment. So if we realize that, we can start to practice to set better boundaries. That doesn't mean we have to put up a wall and push everything back and say no to everything. It means that we can negotiate and say, well, I already have 5 projects that I'm working on. If you want me to take on number 6, something else will likely not get done. So how do we prioritize? And you can have the dialogue, right?
I used to remember when I was doing research and studying coaching around the boundaries specifically and why people don't set boundaries. And we came to the anger as emotion that is driving, as you said beautifully at the beginning of the podcast, this whole boundary setting. Then I begin using this in my coaching practice and training. Somebody comes to conversations, I'm so angry, I'm so pissed off. And I'm like, great, wonderful. Now we can do something about the situation. Now is the time to use that to reinforce, really engage, instead of saying, no, don't be angry, shush, it's all good to be angry. I love that you're coming from the same perspective that, in these given moments, we use that emotion in the most constructive way going forward instead of labeling it as something that isn't good for us.
Yeah. But if you think about I don't know, how you were raised and how you grew up, but so many of us have grown up with these cliches and this notion of, man up, big boys don't cry, be a man, and girls don't get angry, they don't throw temper tantrums, and, it's okay for a girl to cry, but not a boy, and all these stereotypical conditions that that have been put on us. And if our parents weren't good about talking about emotions and they've kind of swept them under the carpet, then that's what we've learned. We've learned that it's not right to talk about emotions. They should be hidden, suppressed, avoided, especially the bad ones, the negative ones, So that's, a lot of us face that.
that re-education, and then we also carry this into work life. And now we're getting slowly to the end of this wonderful recording. This is a topic that we can talk for hours. This is one of these topics. It's so invigorating and so lovely to explore. So as we are kind of coming closer to the wrap up of this, anything that you feel you would love to invite our audience to think about, to listen, to explore, to practice, anything that comes naturally to you, any kind of golden nuggets of wisdom or a hack that you tried with somebody in the past that might work spontaneously, that comes out from our conversation for our audience to play with?
Well, definitely going back to, trying to increase as best as you can the vocabulary. And there are lots of really good books. My personal teacher and mentor has been Carla McLaren. She's an American author and educator. She's written 2 really, really good books, The Language of Emotions and The Art of Empathy. And those are really good sources to start with. But anything that you can do to practice and learn a more nuanced, increased vocabulary about what each emotion what levels of the emotion that you can feel, and also what gifts and messages do they hold for you? Why do they come up? Because the emotions don't come up as a problem. They come up when there is a problem. They are not the problem themselves. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway, trying to educate yourself as best as you can, because when you are a leadership development facilitator or a coach, in any conversation you are having, in the room, with the client, with the team, emotions are going to be there. So the more we can express them and the more accurately we can describe them, the better conversation we can have, and also understand what action to take. Or maybe no action, but that's also an action, So
no action, which is the next, exactly. Yeah. Being wise, being also mature. I love this term, emotional maturity. That for me, it's all about being in relationship with your emotions, not bypassing them, not putting them aside, really feeling them, feeling the whole spectrum. My takeout will be that I've learned a long time ago that we cannot feel whole spectrum of emotions if you don't feel negative emotions as well. I was personally taught to bypass negative emotions, just be happy, as you said, happy bias syndrome, happy. But then I realized if I'm not able to feel grief or sadness or disappointment or anger, I was actually not able to feel the good emotions to the full spectrum of their intensity, because I was just taking away the ability to sense, ability to feel. And when I realized that, then I began giving myself permission, now I need to feel everything in order for me to be fully engaged with the entire life. And it really worked for me well. Yeah. My kind of encouragement to everybody, feel everything. It doesn't matter if it's bad or good.
Yeah, and I think maybe it helps to not categorize it into good emotions and bad emotions, or right or wrong, or negative or positive. If we just say and accept and agree that all emotions are equal, all emotions are necessary, they aren't good or bad, they aren't positive or negative, then we can start to really welcome all of them, and not think about, I don't really want to, jealousy is not going there. But jealousy can help you in some instances, And so really this whole notion, I think, would be maybe my biggest advice to people. Try not to categorize them into negative and positive. Just welcome them all equally, because they're all carrying a message for us.
Exactly. Whatever emerges, be in relationship with that. Pia, thank you so much for coming to this podcast. It was joy and pleasure to talk to and explore this landscape of emotional intelligence, how this applies to the work life, what can we do, how can we be, and how can we show up in everyday life to become, better leader, better human beings, better people, full stop, better people, full stop. And then when we all of that, then everything that we really would love to have in workplace, productivity, creativity, innovation happens as a natural bypass and as a natural effect of all of that. So thank you so much for enlightening us in that direction. And for everybody else, thank you so much for coming into this podcast week after week, liking us, sharing us on Spotify. The Spotify audience is growing. We are super grateful for everybody who is our fan, who is our follower. Share us if you feel this podcast was good for you with your colleagues and workmates and workmates. Thank you once again, Pia. wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.